I called our president Fatty Shack. And Blob the Builder, and Liger Woods, and the Hungry Hungry Hypocrite, our fondling father, Mar-a-Lardo, Nelson Tandela, and Nostradamus. And somehow we got a Peabody out of that.
The night Jimmy Kimmel stood on that stage, clutching a Peabody Award, the most prestigious prize in broadcasting, he wasn't celebrating. He was sending a warning, because what most people don't know is that just months before this moment, the federal government tried to silence him. Jimmy Kimmel has been on late-night television for over 2 decades. He started as a party guy, a sports junkie, the host of The Man's Show. Nobody expected him to become one of the most politically dangerous voices on American television. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. He started aiming at the most powerful man in the country, and he didn't stop. The nicknames came fast: Fatty Shack, Blob the Builder, Liger Woods, the Hungry Hungry Hypocrite, our fondling father, Mar-a-Lardo, Nelson Tandela, Nostradamus. Every single one aimed directly at Donald Trump. In Washington Notice. In September of the previous year, the Federal Communications Commission, the government body that controls broadcast licenses, delivered what Kimmel himself described as a very unpleasant surprise. The details were not disclosed publicly, but the message was clear. There are consequences for this kind of comedy. Let that sink in. The FCC targeting a late-night comedian. For jokes though, this is where the story gets bigger than one man and one TV show, because what happened next was not what the government expected. Millions of people pushed back. Not just liberals, not just fans. People from across the political aisle stood up. They canceled streaming subscriptions. They marched. They made noise. The backlash was so loud and so fast that it became its own story, a story about what Americans are still willing to fight for when they feel their freedoms being compressed. Kimmel himself seemed genuinely stunned by it. He said so on stage. He admitted that for 57 years of his life, he had taken the right to criticize and satirize power completely for granted. He never thought it would actually be threatened. Not here. Not in America. That complacency, that assumption that free speech is permanent and untouchable, is exactly what made the FCC move so chilling. Because it wasn't a joke, it was a test. And the industry was watching to see who would blink first.
For granted for the first 57 years of my life until September of last year when the FCC delivered a very unpleasant surprise. But then I experienced something that surprised me even more. I watched as millions of people, even some from across the aisle, objected. They spoke up, they marched, they canceled their subscriptions to Star Wars because they refused to allow our freedoms to be bulldozed like the East Wing of the White House. They sent a message, you sent a message that we do care and that we will stand up and that we will not stand by when comedy and journalism and dissent are censored and regulated and criminalized. Right, Guillermo?
Right, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Kimmel didn't blink. And now here's the part that the headlines missed entirely. A Peabody Award, given to journalism, documentary filmmaking, radio, and public media that serves the public interest, was handed to a comedian for roasting a president. The committee didn't just reward the comedy. They were making a statement.
If you didn't know it from reading the news already, this country really has gone to shit. Making jokes about the president in America shouldn't win you a prize. We have the right, guaranteed by the Constitution, to criticize and satirize our leaders. This is a right that many of us take for granted. It's one that I took for granted for the first 57 years of my life until September of last year when the FCC delivered a very unpleasant surprise.
They were drawing a line, and they were saying, loudly and on record, that what Kimmel was doing mattered to his speech that night wasn't triumphant. It was uncomfortable. He stood alongside journalists who exposed prison abuse, activists who documented ICE brutality, educators who defied authoritarian governments, and he stood there holding an award for calling the president Nostra dumbass.
Send a message that we do care and that we will stand up and that we will not stand by when comedy and journalism and dissent are censored and regulated and criminalized. Right, Guillermo?
Right, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you for always having my back.
He knew how it looked. He said so directly. He felt dumb, but that discomfort is the point. Because the Peabody wasn't just for the jokes. It was for refusing to stop. It was for staying on air through regulatory pressure. It was for the moment when the machine tried to grind down his platform, and he kept going anyway. What no one is asking yet is this: if the FCC targeted Kimmel, who else got that call? Which other voices received quiet warnings that were never made public? Which monologues were quietly edited? Which segments were pulled? Which jokes were killed before they ever aired? That information does not exist in any public record, and nobody in the industry is talking. So here's the question nobody in Hollywood wants to answer. If the government can threaten a Peabody Award winner into silence and fail, what happens to everyone who doesn't have his platform, his lawyers, or his audience? Subscribe to Celeb Zeno, because this story is not over, and we are just getting started.